So without further delay, allow me to explain how I went from 100.5 pounds to 93.5 in just under a week, how my mom tried to use legal bullshit to justify whatever nonsense runs through her head, and a good bit of calculated self-harm. This is how that story begins. Oh boy, do I have a story for you. Some people have bad days, but have you ever had a bad month? And better yet, it wasn't due to random circumstance either. It was a terrible month, not because of chance, but because of the people around me. Let's go back to October and explain why my laptop, desktop, and dignity was ultimately stolen from me. This is the story of my parents. Have you wondered where I've been for the past month? I'm sure you haven't. Literally, who cares where a YouTuber goes? They disappear all the time for months and then spring up out of nowhere with some half-decent content. Isn't it funny how you can make the best presentation of your life only to have your parents tell you how worthless you are only minutes later, and then go so far as to remove anything you've worked for from you? Maybe I'll put out that video, because I did record that presentation too, but I'll give you some more context here. I am the definition of a worthless college dropout. I sit around all day and do nothing but make YouTube videos and plug my Patreon. Of course, there's a few games sprinkled in there, but that's who I am. At least to my parents. You see, it's really easy to make assumptions about people, especially online, and not actually know a single thing about who they are, what they've done, how many people they've convinced to stay in the realm of the living, and a whole host of other things. Go meet someone and really, truly try to understand them, and you might enjoy it. You might even learn something about yourself in the process. Back to this worthless college dropout, aka Furry Trash, aka the guy who dropped out of college despite being in the top of his class and making a network of 2,600 students, aka the guy who wakes up some days with 3 hours of sleep to keep working on YouTube. And here I am, sitting in my bed, recounting where this went wrong. What actually went wrong? Well, let's talk about my parents for a bit. Much like I said earlier, getting to know someone is important, but I'll portray them in an equal light as to how they see me. My mom sits around the house most days and works less hours than I do, and then complains to me about how my dad doesn't do enough for her. She's a medical worker and also a politician at heart, who enjoys the simple things in life like staying on Facebook 24/7 and getting mad at random strangers or political opponents on the internet. On the contrary, my dad works her typical 9-to-5 office job as a senior software developer, and sometimes spends weeks developing an array or a few buttons that'll be used by maybe 20 people ever. See how easy it is to look at the negatives? Okay, so where am I going with this? Well, let's talk about static versus dynamic characters too. A dynamic character is a character that's got multiple dimensions to them. They think and learn and feel and know how to respond to emotional stimuli. A static character can wake up every day and do the same thing over and over again, and not realize it, almost like what I do. Can you guess which category my parents fit into? If you've guessed static characters, you'd be wrong, and I'm going to bully you now for it. You see, my parents know how to take things a day at a time and were so incredibly supportive of my YouTube idea that they let me go full time and even offered to throw in a yacht, a mansion, and a meeting with the president. I'm kidding, of course. They're boomers with no idea in the slightest how the internet works, despite also watching my videos for some godforsaken reason. Which, while I'm breaking the fourth wall and have their attention, I'm announcing a new tier on Patreon called the Fuck My Parents tier, where you can pay $20 to have your name printed out on a piece of paper when I eventually leave this cesspool of a home behind to let my parents know just how many strangers on the internet believe in what I'm doing while they never could. That's a mouthful, holy. Back to our story here, much like 90% of the Christian world, we slap that religious title onto our lives, pray once a month, and believe that Jesus loves us because we read that in the Bible one time despite forgetting any and all context of that passage of scripture. Meet my parents. The absence of love filled with an even deeper void of selfish ambition, and trust me, I know selfish ambition myself, having been raised of their flesh and blood. Man, how can you say that your parents don't love you? Haven't they given you a lot in life so far? Yes, and yes, they have. But we often forget what love is. Let's go back to that holier than thou perspective for a second. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. What does this mean? Well, let's forget all the fancy mumbo-jumbo and look at the real red, white, and blue-blooded, gun-shooting, plain American English. The first 6 words are, for God so loved the world. He didn't just love the world, but so loved it. Why is this important? Well, what does he do? He gave his only begotten Son. Love is a sacrifice, a gift given in full and bathed in the holiness that is God's grace. Can I get an amen in the comments for that? Back to being furry trash, my parents don't love me. My life has been a series of tasks put in front of me by them, and when I don't want to do them, much like any other governing force, they get mad. Grrr, angry. They decided to take away my computer and laptop because as a 13-year-old child, I only understand how mad they are from the punishments they dish out, rather than sitting down and having a mature conversation. But no! I have to be the only adult in the room to realize just how silly this is, and how idiotic they both have to be to ignore what I've accomplished this past month. And then verbally berate me for the following month. But hey, I totally understand this. God didn't accept Cain's sacrifice made by Cain's own hands, so Cain killed his brother. It's the only logical thing to do in that case, right? Well, instead of following that bloodline, let's take a look at the right thing to do. Keep moving forward. A quick parable for my anxiety. Yesterday is history, tomorrow makes me jittery, and today is going so well. Don't mess it up. And yet I'm still here sitting on my bed making a video despite my 13-year-old monkey brain knowing, I got my devices taken away. I clearly made my parents mad. I'm still 20, by the way. How do I move forward? Well, the same way I've done this since conception.
Ignore anything and everything that gets in your way and have an emotionless disposition as you plan to take over the internet.
Alternatively, I'm getting a job. Or according to my blood relatives, a real job. You see, it's so funny to me that they're fine paying thousands of dollars to college for a piece of paper, yet when I make $13.50 2 months later after I drop out and can prove that it'll be worth a few grand the next few months with current analytics, they get mad at me for apparently sitting around the house all day not doing anything and make fun of me for how skinny I am because I don't want to waste their money on food for myself. God, what a world. So a real job. What did you decide to do? Well, my mom thinks that I'd be good at being a FedEx driver because that's where the top 2% of the academic world belongs. But I went back to LinkedIn, posted an "I'd like a job and will suck anyone off to do it" message, and found a bunch of bots messaging me speaking in moon runes. Great social media platform, by the way, definitely not flooded with AI, bots, and other forms of cam. But hey, in the business world, that's what life's about, right? My LinkedIn is set up for game development, but I had some other plans in mind. You see, as part of the top 2% of YouTube with my army of 800 subscribers, I've amassed a near critical amount of experience. I changed my LinkedIn around to include my experience with YouTube, and by that I mean made literally 1 or 2 changes, and then sat around and waited. Yep, that's it. I put games on my phone and waited. I also wanted to have read the entire Bible by the end of the month, so I started reading through Genesis as well. And probably drew a few cursed furry drawings by the end of the week to supplement my mental issues, because it's spooky month, and I might as well do something, even if it's mostly irrelevant to the actual prompts for Inktober. Let's skip ahead to the interesting part here. How I got a job and satiated my parents despite TQ so hated them that he gave his only begotten Patreon members that whosoever payeth him should not be forgotten, but end up on their doorstep on parchment when I move out. First 2 days were boring anyways, because other than scripting, losing any mental stability that I once had, coming up with bad jokes like that last line, or sleeping, and maybe a bit of cleaning, literally nothing of interest happened. Actually, scratch that. Let's take a second to talk about mobile games for a second. Does anyone else notice how messed up some of these ads are? This isn't even remotely spelled correctly. AI is great and all, but this lady has 6 fingers. Like, what? Why? I don't swear on this channel, but what the f*** advertisers? Why not just make an actually decent gamer ad for once? We don't need an ad alongside someone knifing soap or whatever other brain rot. Anyways, I found a few actually decent games during my time waiting, of which I would highly recommend Divinico. If you got a magic cat that can parry bullets, what's not to like about that? At least he doesn't have 6 fingers. There's also Cup Heroes, which I think has more ads than Divinico, so I'd recommend that too, because why not watch more ads? Also, hashtag not sponsored, but I would love a sponsor from any willing company with a decent product. Wink wink, nudge nudge. I'll also be making a whole video on mobile games, so subscribe if you want to see that. Or don't, I don't care. Or do I? So between hours of waiting for a response on LinkedIn, being in the most literal sense harassed by my parents for, according to them, being a worthless disgrace to God, while they spend time slamming doors and screaming themselves, I just kept waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Monday the 7th rolls around and my mom goes to my first band instructor's funeral. He was honestly a great man, and even called me when I was crying before a competition due to getting braces literally the day before. Yeah, I was freaking out a bit, but decided to try it anyways. I think I only ever made the cut 1 year, and it was certainly not that year. That might have actually been the year I came dead last, in fact. Well, upon returning home from the funeral, my mom asked me if I'd walked the dog yet. The great surprise is just like every other day, I refused to answer her. You see, I cannot hurt her with my words if I say nothing, while her words betray her heart, and that will be pretty obvious in these next few moments. I also haven't spoken with my relatives in over a month despite living with them. Anyways, the conversation goes as follows. Did you walk Luna? She waits, and I wait as well. Did you walk Luna? I need to know. Did you walk Luna? 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 I can tell she's really mad because just like a child, she's shouting at me to respond. But I said nothing. Instead, I just stared at the ceiling and gave a silent prayer. No words, no movement, just silence. As the so-called adult kept screaming in front of me, louder and louder. But hey, you know what? Guilt trip Intermission. Do you really think this is what God wants from you? You sit around all day and do nothing. And you see, that's what she thinks of me, as I can assure you that's not the case from everything I've said so far. In fact, I'll even show you at the end of this video that I've kept track of her behavior, or overall productivity, and it's not exactly to her favor. But I'll get to that later. You sit here and rot. Do you think Dad and I are proud? I need to know if you've walked Luna. She gets closer and starts to stand over me, and I'm literally just sitting there staring at the ceiling. Do you think this is funny? Then goes to steal my phone, but I put it back in my pocket. Now, there's some more words she says, of which I'll exclude the more profane parts for the children's ears, but she eventually leaves my room, leaves my door open, calls me a few choice words, and then stomps around the house and slams a few doors. Maybe she's had a bad day or something? I don't know. Is it wrong to think that this is abusive behavior? I was raised in an environment where I thought that didn't happen to the upper middle class because money clearly solved all our problems. Now, while most abuse we think of is physical, this wasn't, at least for the time, but I'd still call that abuse nonetheless. To harass a child, at least from their perspective, or maybe verbal assault if this was from the perspective of two adults, just to put it simply and perhaps in a more legalistic perspective, that's just not how we should treat other people. I've had to threaten specifically my mom in the past with calling the Child Protective Services back when I was younger, and she would on occasion literally beat me. I know I've forgiven her for that, but I don't think her heart will ever be in the right place, and moments like this really reinforce that. It's funny how she couldn't get out of her pajamas the other day to go to church, but watched online, or pretended to, as she was glued to her phone while I went by myself. The message that was being preached on was about the difference between a Christ-like mindset and an anti-Christ-like mindset. One leaves you in fits of agony and rage, while the other gives you peace. And to set your mind upon God, perfect peace. What a funny situation we found ourselves in. Now, I know the way parents, specifically moms, work, where they gain more clout and support from other moms or women just by trashing their kids verbally. So while I can't say I've never spoken against my mom, what I will say is should any of those people who she's probably lied to, or at the very least, stretch the truth to, please consider this alternative perspective. Especially coming from a politician like her, because does anyone really trust politicians nowadays? At least she hasn't fed my dinner to the dog like my dad threatened to earlier this week. You know, I considered an alternate title for this video along the lines of like, the ultimate trauma. But that wouldn't even begin to cover the stuff from before this month. I just have shitty parents and that's the life I have to live. It just sucks because I could give them the greatest speech of all time on morals or where they'll go when they'll die, but it means nothing to fall on deaf ears. And honestly, that's the saddest part of everything. A situation that there's no hope to change in my timeline. But hey, I believe in miracles like this YouTube channel in the first place. I don't deserve anything I've found so far, but yet here it is. An escape from this mess will eventually come too, I'm sure of it. The 8th rolls around, and I've more or less come to the conclusion that A, nobody on LinkedIn cares any more than any other social media, and B, this sucks. So instead, I'm gonna go out and do some stuff myself. My quick list includes Walgreens, Aldi's, Home Depot, and the most straight place I can think of, Dick's. Walgreens and Aldi's were easy picks as they were close by, and the other two were considerations not due to proximity, but just as likely easy jobs to get. Although they were relatively close by as well, so that helps too. So here's the quick story as to how I managed to apply for 2 jobs, and find out that another 2 probably weren't hiring. I woke up having the lingering thoughts that my parents would beat me should I linger in the house longer, so I showered, ate breakfast, and did all the things your typical Joe needs to, and made my way to Walgreens. It's a pharmacy, and while I have some mixed feelings about a medical system dependent on the sickness of its people to continue selling to them, encouraging them to keep their people sick, I decided that the role of a cashier or checkout person wouldn't be too difficult. So I walked in to ask the current cashier, except there was nobody there. Yeah, I think you could have literally walked in and just taken anything because the store was empty except for a few customers, but there was literally no cashier at the front. So I wandered around for a bit to see if they were on break, and nothing. 5 minutes pass, and I see that I can buy 2 large Gatorades for $5 or 1 for $3.50. That's neat. And still no cashier. Well, that's a great start. So I wander into the back and find the actual drug dealers, or I guess the licensed medical professionals. There was this lady in the back, and I just went up to her and asked, "Hey, so I'm not here to pick anything up, but I was looking for a job. I noticed that there wasn't anybody in the front. Is that position available?" She glanced at me and said, "Oh, I'll have to check with my manager. Do you have a resume or anything I can provide them with?" Okay, quick time event, go! I chose to lie and say, "My computer is being repaired at the moment, so I don't have access to one. Could I give you my contact information instead?" "Yeah, sure." And she pulls out a yellow piece of notepaper. I wrote down my information, double check my email because I've had plenty of issues with my email in the past, and then give it to her and leave. But before I go, I ask, "Hey, when will I hear back by?" "Oh, a few days probably, but you'll definitely hear back." I didn't hear back. I still wonder if I wrote it down correctly and if it was half legible, because stuff like this is like a bit of a rush when this isn't really normal for me, at least behaviorally. Sure, bugging my friends online or talking to random strangers is fun, but I feel weird just being on the spot and having to do stuff like this. Almost like attention seeking, but I know it's not, and just another part of life. Okay, existential crisis out of the way, and onwards to Aldi's. It's right across the street from Walgreens, so it's just a quick walk from there. Also, feel free to dox me with that information, because I already know my address. Take that, liberals. And atheists, I guess, or whatever group of people it's fun to point a finger at. Yays, maybe. Laugh, please. So I walk into Aldi's, and it's equally empty. I guess nobody is out buying groceries at 9 in the morning, and they're probably just sitting around home brewing coffee and then forgetting where they left it, like my mom. Great role models. So I wander around for a bit again, and then walk up to the cashier. I'm not going to reenact this one, mostly because I can't do a good voice, but she was equally as kind as the last woman I spoke to. The TLDR version was that they're not hiring, but there's a website you can apply on. Great, let's check that. Oh, it requires a resume. a resume I don't have because my parents decided, herb derp, let's remove this goober's resources because I wasn't already living life on hard mode as a furry. So that's off my list, but hey, glad I asked. Now let's go to Mr. 6 Inches himself, the sporting empire and shoe experts at Dick's Sporting Goods, which I might just reference as DSG from now on because that's easier, and while recording this, it sounds weird to be screaming about Dick's in my room. So I figured Dick's would be the perfect fit for me. I hear they've got everything from balls to protective gear, and trust me, I can handle both. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with a place known for handling all sorts of equipment? Plus they've got great positions open, and I'm ready to grab the best one with both hands. So I walked into the store, and like the previous two stores, I walked around and browsed the equipment. Sadly, it wasn't quite what I was looking for, as it didn't have the one thing their store is known for, as the name might imply, but I did meet another friendly cashier. This time it was a guy, and he was very friendly as well. He pointed me to a table out in front that the manager had just finished setting up, and it said in big, bold letters, "Join the team." Would you look at that? I think they're hiring. Okay, so I was given the manager's card, scanned a QR code, and then filled out the entire application in my car. Easy, done, and time to go back to my home and wait another few days, hoping that an email with a large dick squirms its way into my inbox. I need to chill out with these jokes. So I went back home, read some more of my Bible as I desperately needed it after making those jokes, walked my dog like I normally do, made lunch, and all those things. Perhaps not necessarily in that order, but we're all done nonetheless. And then back to the waiting game. Super long video where most of it is just waiting, right? Well, sorry to disappoint, but I enjoy telling these overly verbose and perhaps slightly exaggerated stories. Now, back to my depressing life, and the night arrives. My blood relatives make their way back into the building that we call home, but really it's just a place where we live and drain each other mentally. In the time that I've been waiting to hear back from my job applications, I learned that I've actually lost weight. Figures if I haven't eaten more than 1 to 2 meals a day due to simply avoiding my parents, but between that, doing give or take 100 sit-ups a day, and walking my dog give or take a mile every day, it kinda makes sense. I wasn't fat beforehand or anything, in fact I'm actually quite thin, weighing 100.5 pounds now. Try not to think on that one too hard. I go to church every Sunday that I'm able to, and find myself working cameras there again this Sunday. I planned on doing that some, and maybe asking for a job if literally anyone was offering one. My two conditions were keeping me out of my own house, and I just want enough money to afford a $400 laptop by the end of the month, which is like 1 week's worth of minimum wage work if it's full-time for comparison. Now, did I get that? Nope. Was I more or less afraid to ask? Yeah, a little bit. And wow, look at that, let's skip forward in time a week. Y'all know I'm a fan of D&D on this channel, so think of this like one of those convenient time skips. Or if you haven't played D&D, just think of Skyrim or Witcher, or literally any of those games where you can just sit on a bench and pass an infinite amount of time if you feel like it. Well, where did that week go? Well, as you'll see at the end of this video, a lot of reading, a lot of drawing, and a lot of mobile gaming or watching videos, as I've said before. I also managed to sneak in S-ranking every Expert Plus song on Beat Saber except for Power of the Saber Blade and Ghost, because honestly, screw both of those songs. I'd literally rather go play Galaxy Collapse than play either of those songs. If that wasn't the highlight of my week, I would probably be coming back from church, cruising on the highway 1 or 2 miles over the speed limit, blasting Stardew Valley music. And another quick random intermission. Let's play a game of what videos are in my recommended today, because YouTube probably thinks that I'm like a fusion of Boss Baby and Magnus Carlsen or something as a brain-rotted child who's also obsessed with chess, science, and a few other niche things. And I can't show that, that's literally just very porn. But besides my interests, I also went through YouTube and watched every video of my editors and artist channels to support the homies. Might as well boost the algorithm, as they say, for their channels. I'll also go ahead and drop all of them down in the description as well, because I can assure you making this video took probably more time and energy than it's worth. Mostly because the channel isn't monetized yet. These guys are also the reason the channel is as good as it is, because our artists bring the raw creative talent, Luke brings the references, Osher brings the good ideas, and I bring the cringe content, so it works out. Anyways, just go check them out or something, because there's something on their channels for everyone, whether it's Geometry Dash, funny moments, or Gorilla Tag even. They're just a bunch of really talented people. I wouldn't take the whole world over them. And hey, they were even busy while I was gone, and added another guy to the team. Waff, or Waif, or Wof. I'm not sure, but I'm sure one of the editors, or he will correct me himself. But the team took the initiative to keep moving along with videos while I'm gone, so major shout out to them. But besides that, Osher was playing Geometry Dash and living the college life. Luke was training Waff, Joey was working on another video and also college stuff. Probably. And did I forget anyone? Probably not. Okay, back to my personal hell. Dix took more than 2 weeks to finish responding to my application and come to me. I was like, man, it's almost like they really didn't want someone to join the team, like their sign said on the table that I saw when I walked in 2 weeks ago. But hey, no worries. I've only wasted like 4% of my year waiting. Wow, that puts into perspective how much nothing I've done. At least I got the script ready for this video in that time. It's not like my editors were working on VR chat renders in my persona to work on other cool projects while I sat in bed this entire time. Back to my life again, I also did my parents' laundry for them because I figured that would be received well. But instead, I was yelled at for that and told I should go to counseling. God, what a world. Am I wrong to think living on the streets would be better on the emotional health than living with two so-called Christians? Like, if the world is foreshadowed to come against God's people, I surely understand why it would happen, and would even go as far as to say, let it be so. We really deserve it. Oh hey, look at that! Oh, and another. A company wants to sponsor the YouTube channel for $500 and throw in a $200 microphone? That sounds like a steal to me. Let's just ask my editors what they think, and oh, yeah, that's a scam. Well, it's a great thing that my friends keep me in check, or I definitely would have gone after that opportunity. But I have the world's greatest Redditor on my team to help keep us safe. Well, at least the other email can't be worse, right? Dix wants to hire me? Oh my gosh, finally. Oh wait, it says job fair. Oh. But hey, it's a start, right? Maybe they'll keep me around after that too, and something decent will come from it. Who knows, but I'm glad they only took 2 weeks to get back to me. That's better than 3 at least, right? And well, yeah, it's good news, but it's on November 6th. The day I received those emails was October 22nd. Back to waiting. After I sent an email back to the manager expressing interest in the job fair, it was back to reading the Bible, drawing, walking my dog, and sit-ups. Lots and lots of sit-ups. Mobile games too, because hey, why not? And I won't lie, the video would be pretty boring if that's all I did. So I'll talk about how I managed to weasel my laptop back out of the situation. You see, I hadn't spoken, texted, or really communicated in any form with my parents in 20 days at this point. I hadn't said a word in this household in 20 days. The 22nd of October marked the 20th day of this trend, because all of this started on October 2nd. But I did leave a note at my mom's seat at the table this day, which read, this morning, I went through my email to discover a $500 sponsorship for my YouTube channel, and a company that would like to give me a $200 microphone to use in the video. I'm requesting that my laptop be returned to me so I can use this opportunity. Thanks. So how did you get your laptop out of this? Well, a little bit of unintentional deceit sprinkled in with breaking my own personal rules, and another sticky note, which read, I also need the laptop to respond to an email for this job, and a DSG manager's card right underneath it. Regardless of which reason they caved and gave me my laptop back, whether it was the sponsorship or whether it was Dix, that made room for a conversation, and likely the only one I'd grant them. As expected, it was very much rehashing everything else that said previously. In one night, I'd confessed everything they've done back to them, while I just sat there and took it. They said I was delusional for thinking it was abusive. Like, really? Me? The schizophrenic furry? Delusional? What? I'm not actually schizophrenic, but honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to hallucinations if it meant thinking my parents were better people. But hey, I got my laptop back to send a few quick emails. But while I'm on that topic of hallucinations, are there any dreamers watching? And no, that's not an Undertale reference, despite how I scripted it. Typically, I don't or never remember my dreams, but the irony is, I've actually had a few dreams these past week, in which my parents behave better than they normally do. It's absurd the things my brain does to try to rework the reality in which I live to make life seem semi-normal. But hey, it's a nice reality to sleep in, despite my waking hours returning to everything I've explained so far. Every morning, I wake up to a bathroom that has more fecal matter on the ground and countertops than the toilet. Because of our old cat that feels the need to go in, poop on the carpet or rug in there, and then spread it around. Now, knowing that he only poops on the rug in there, my mom has gone out of her way to make it my problem by repeatedly putting the rug back in the bathroom for him to poop on. So that's been fun. Imagine having parents that even with half a brain cell can't figure out how to take care of pets, much less have adult conversations with a 20-year-old. Now for the really grim news. This video is titled My Personal Hellscape. If that's what you're going to complain about, why not just call it Poopscape? Well, you see, this is where the story takes a turn for the worse. The absolute worst, in fact. The nuclear option. Fallout 5. The genocide route, if you will. But you see, after Undying the Undying, there's an even worse surprise waiting for you. Starvation. But before that, I was able to use my laptop for a few days. What did I do with that time? Honestly, mostly just catching up with my YouTube team, Discord server of like 300 members, and of course, random idle games. There's a spreadsheet that I use to log my video ideas, hours, and some other random experiments on, and I told the team that I'd more or less been updating that during this mess, despite not reaching out in any other way, so that we can keep moving forward. I also learned just how deprived my Discord server was of social interaction, because apparently I'm the only one to facilitate conversation, and people were practically begging for me to return at some point. And for any of those that know that I'm leaving out one other key piece, I'll go ahead and explain that too. There's a few times I reached out to people before I truly came back online for the sole reason that, well, I have responsibilities. I can't just run away from everything, and while, yeah, it's maybe the easy thing to do, and at the time, all of this was in the name of self-preservation because of the hellhole that my family is. There were relationships and friends. People that prayed for me, and even people trying to join my YouTube team, because hey wow, we suck at putting out quality content consistently, so why not add to our ability to do that? So without further delay, allow me to explain how I went from 100.5 pounds to 93.5 in just under a week, how my mom tried to use legal bullshit to justify whatever nonsense runs through her head, and a good bit of calculated self-harm. This is how that story ends. Okay, so let's speedrun to the important part here. I love verbose stories, but let's just pick this up and run with it. I lost my laptop again when my parents decided they didn't want me to have it. There was seemingly no reason for them taking it back, and while I could ask them to justify this, I don't really care enough to restart this catastrophe engine. It was spontaneous, obnoxious, but I expected it. I told everyone that my circumstance is very much temporary, because I'm living with tyrannical morons. And even after finishing this story more than a month after all this happened, I still fully 100% wholeheartedly agree with these statements. I was going to walk my dog, and my dad said he was taking the laptop again. Great. I still didn't really plan on saying anything to my parents, and this time was no exception. I just walked downstairs and put my dog's leash and harness on to walk her, knowing that I'd have to find some way to get it back eventually. Whether it was, stealing it back, because that's all my parents have ever taught me to do from literally all of this, or some other way. And let's just say I didn't pick the easy way, but ultimately it did pay off. I walked my dog knowing that most of what I'd worked on the past couple days would have to come to another pause, and just contemplated my options. Fall is probably my favorite season, as much as it is my favorite thing to watch others do. You've got that nice crisp air that's cool enough you can feel it in your lungs, but not quite frigid yet. The ambiance of crunching leaves, and just knowing that, hey, Halloween is soon. I mean, today was the 26th of October, so I was looking forward to Halloween, even if I wasn't going to be able to do anything for it. I mean, this holiday has probably some of my favorite endgame events for most games I play. So at least there's the thought that I could do something with that time, but alas, no laptop. And as I got back to my house with my dog, taking the absolute longest way possible as I had the past 3 weeks, I wasn't looking forward to seeing my laptop gone. Again. I walked up into my room and saw all of my wires dangling off the side of my desk, some even into the trash can next to my desk. You can imagine my face when I saw that as the OCD freak I am. My dad had taken the laptop and left without any consideration for the state in which he left my desk. Great leadership, by the way, 10 out of 10. Screw it, 11 out of 10, I don't care. You know, probably one of the saddest parts about growing up and losing that precious childhood innocence is meeting the people you looked up to as a child. Whether it's a celebrity crush or someone that you think is so cool, but I'm sure you've heard the saying, never meet your heroes. Seeing the people my parents really are, I think I've honestly come to despise them more than I would have thought. The ironic truth here is that this is supposed to happen if we throw a biblical prophecy in the equation. But hey, nobody likes math, so let's march forward instead. I got back to my room and kinda just sat there. What do? Do I steal it back? Do I just keep waiting this out? And, continuing to wait might have solved this, as it did solve another problem that I'll get to later, but I was done waiting. I was really done waiting. Maybe it was merciful not to speak to my parents, but I was kind of done putting up with them. Not a single person I know of would sit there and enable their parents to do this to them. But at the same time, no parents that I know of would put their kid in a situation like this. I truly reject the notion that these are my parents at all. So why let them put in half the work of parents and neglect the love that's supposed to make this clock tick? I pulled out a blue sticky note. The same ones I have written on so many times, and either created some half-decent art, or just left some brief communication. But this wasn't going to be for either of those purposes. This was a statement. This was a war cry. This marks the moment that I became an adult. This marks the moment that I reject my parents. This marks the moment everything would change. I'm not eating anymore until all of my property is returned. And looking back on that note, I was thinking about putting some dumb flair in there like, love, your son, or a brief bit of colorful poetry. Swear words. But I have no regrets in what I left them either. Some of the most powerful statements are the shortest and most concise ones. And with this note, I'd also forgotten something. A core part that makes me me. The same person that had given so many people, so many friends, so many random strangers on the internet, mercy and compassion. I think in growing up, it's easy to lose ourselves, and I'd lost those very two things. Compassion and mercy. So many people have returned to me over the years with apologies, and I've accepted them back. I don't really care what people have done, but if they're willing to make a genuine change and see some merit to being a better person to whatever they've done previously, I was willing to accept them back. How naive of me. I think it'd be easy to forgive my parents of all people, but I don't know what the future holds. Truly, this is the wild card. People often misunderstand the Bible. I know, as I'm kind of a dumbass. As giving us no room for judgment, but there's a fundamental error here. It's easy to remember the big picture, but sometimes we miss these small details. We cannot discern someone's motive. We can, however, study someone's actions and make a determination as to what that means for the person. I do not know the future. I will never know the future. Trust me, I'd love to. But I do have the past. Who are these people in front of me then? So with this one piece of paper, it was done. I wrote this in pencil as the professional that I am, and left this at my mom's seat at the table. She's a doctor, so she's actually able to read, although my handwriting isn't exactly legible, but the writing was on the wall, or on the sticky note. On the table? Yeah, that makes sense, whatever. So back to my room to wait, and only a few hours later, that waiting wasn't exactly fruitless. My mom came into my room and asked why I wrote the note. I wasn't exactly keen on saying anything, but eventually I caved because I know that the one thing she cares about is my physical health, and she seemed a bit sad. That said, this conversation, like so many others, would prove to be nothing more than sinful at best and a waste of time at second best. She left in tears, and that was that. Great. So, back to my room to wait. So that night, I fell asleep not having eaten anything. And it's weird because normally I'm not really hungry in the first place. I had this friend at college that suggested I might have ARFID or something, and trust me, while I have plenty of mental abnormalities, as you probably hear from my voice fluctuating in these weird tones, I don't really care enough to see any of those diagnosed for the sake of my own future prospects and well-being. Nonetheless, I wasn't hungry, which makes all this a bit easier. It's another surprise benefit to your head not exactly being in the right place due to everything that's occurred over the past several weeks. The next few days would sort of pass by quickly, but not exactly either. It's easier to look back on this stuff in retrospect and say it was quick, but maybe it wasn't. I'm not going to be the type to complain, at least more than I have already, but I will make a half-hour video essay as a painful reminder at the very least. These days were filled with more hours of mobile games and some chatting with friends on Discord. I didn't exactly want to go back offline, so it was a lot of sitting around just waiting for my parents to eventually cave. That said, I was also being smart and saving calories as I stopped doing my daily 100 plus sit-ups, and I was a bit more lethargic. The second night, however, was a bit less straightforward, as not eating was starting to get to me just a little bit, teeny tiny bit. I almost passed out. Parents, you didn't know that until now, but yeah, I knew there were risks, but I'm still glad I took them. Suck it. Your quick story as to how that happened starts with that blood rush you get from standing up too quickly. You know how your vision fades a bit after laying down and then getting up in a rush? Maybe that's just me because I try to do everything too quickly, but try passing out if you haven't already. Anyways, I don't know if the effect of not eating amplified that, or made it worse by extension, but I got up from my bed to be hygienic and brush my teeth and stuff before sleeping. But instead of that lightheaded feeling fading while in the bathroom, it just got worse as the minutes passed. So much to the point where I was drenched in sweat leaving, but on the bright side, I did fall asleep almost immediately afterwards. TQ1, Sleep 0. The next day, my dad took a shot at the single brain cell that is my headspace and tried to talk me out of this. In that conversation, he accused me of suicidal tendencies due to my strategy at bargaining. And trust me, when I say this is very much not the case. I know that I'm not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer some days, perhaps the cleanest eraser in the pencil pouch, or maybe the biggest donut in the container. But again, I'm not suicidal in any way. I have plenty to live for, and if necessary, I would do what I must to live. That said, I am also a man of my word, so I do my best to uphold promises I've made. Certain exclusions apply, batteries not included, etc, but I will do my best when appropriate, and I wasn't backing down here. So he left in a disgruntled fashion, slamming the door, and I was left by myself with a bit more peace and quiet than he'll likely see in hell. Grotesque imagery, isn't it? So over the next few days, I did my best to keep my head held high as the shorter than 6 foot male that I am, but my energy gradually declined. Symptoms of not eating would get worse over time as I felt like my ribcage was pressing into my side, so I could only really comfortably lay on my back. Then there came the bile or whatever chemical was in my stomach. Stomach acid? Monster Energy? Whatever it is, you can feel it in your throat while sleeping, if you're not propped up at a slight incline or decline or whatever while sleeping. Yeah, it sucks. If it wasn't obvious earlier in the video, literally never do any of this, like ever. I don't think there's a single person watching this that will benefit from this in any way, so just take it from this veteran of masochism and don't do this. Please, thank you, goodbye, period, end of the sentence, whatever. Then came Christian counseling, and let me tell you, I was thrilled. My parents would finally see some of their issues pointed out. There might be a massive plank in my eye, but if genetics mean anything, it might have been passed down. I was driven to this place like half an hour away with my parents at the front of the car. No conversation really passed other than briefly checking for directions on my parents' end. And truthfully, I don't really remember much about the drive there. But I can tell you a lot about the facility. Saying facility makes it seem ominous, but it wasn't really that bad. Anyways, the building itself wasn't anything too crazy either. On entering, there's this stairway to the right with a wooden railing, and the entry door itself is metal. I've actually scraped my hand on that door a few times because the opening and closing mechanism is a bit abnormal. There's a screw that sort of pokes out in this weird latch design. Up the stairs and past a bathroom was the room we'd spend a few hours of our time in, across a few help sessions. It's always playing Claire de Lune in the background, and there are some relatively cozy couches there too to set our scenery here. There are 11 paintings, 1 mirror, a counselor aged to the latter half of his life, and then my poor excuse of a family. He asked for my name and I provide it, but he gets it wrong. I'd extend or explain the joke further here, but I'll wait for someone else to dox me on this platform before I do it myself. Anyways, this guy is definitely on the older side as I've tried to imply earlier and might be hard of hearing. It's also possible that I mumbled a bit or ended up sounding like some off-brand XQC because sometimes I speak on the faster side if you've seen any of the shorts on this channel. Regardless, my expectations weren't exactly high, but between this session and the ones that would follow, I've actually found him to be quite respectable for his knowledge of the Bible and rebuke of my parents for their inability to recognize me as a young adult. I don't typically respect older people as I found their lack of experience to be disappointing in juxtaposition with their age, but he's one of the few anomalies in my life, or that grand generalization I've just made. Now, where the aforementioned legal BS fits in is the following conversation. My mom probably revealed too many cards in her hand when she brought up Florida's Baker Act. When talking with the counselor, as upon looking it up, it seems like her intention was to force me into a mental health clinic using this situation as leverage for that. Of course, this isn't Florida, so her brilliance once again gave way to her moral decadence. I genuinely don't think I have ever hated someone so much in one moment. Like, I know she's a scummy political bitch, but that goes way beyond what I thought she would ever consider. What a f***ing bastard. And to think we could just go back to living normally after knowing stuff like this, or the times she mentioned that she wanted to get rid of me directly to my face, honestly says more about her than it does about me. That whole comment earlier about the absence of love filled with an even deeper void of selfish ambition might not have been an exaggeration. Newsflash, people. Although I do love the theatrics of storytelling and would go so far as to say it's probably a coping mechanism at this point. Back to the whole Baker situation though, I figure I should add some more context. That information wasn't revealed until returning to the counselor again, so it's not like this was during the first meeting, but I still can't believe stuff like this happened, even scripting this more than a month later. Back to present day. Upon leaving, my parents are left with the ultimatum that he would not meet with us again until I eat again, as he didn't wish to meet with people that could suffer from self-inflicted health hazards. I found that interesting, as I've always thought those people are the people that need the most help, and while he mentioned working with people like that in the past, I can't blame him for the toll that must take knowing someone and having the same knowledge that the work we might have put into them wasn't enough to save them. And on the brighter side, it forced my parents' hand even further. They attempted to convince me to eat again, and even offered up the laptop too. This is a clear indication to me that they were grasping for straws, but they'd taken more than just my laptop. My main desktop PC was out of commission, and I'd lost this past month thanks to them, so I wasn't backing down. I said that until all of my property that was unrightfully taken from me was returned, I would not eat. I'm a man of my word. A man with an otter persona and a mental health cataclysm of a Discord server. So I left them to their misery at the dinner table, and once again, without eating, went back upstairs to my room to grind Top Heroes or some other dumb mobile game. Probably Battle Cats too. Actually, back to Top Heroes for a second, I actually made one of the top guilds in that game despite paying $0 in microtransactions in a very pay-to-win game. So that was fun while it lasted. Then I promptly forgot about it because I eventually got my laptop back again and forgot about all the lame mobile games. Idle games are where it's at. And apparently it's the only part of this channel that matters too. Also, the only video that's ever gotten a copyright strike because one of the editors made an oopsie, which I'm sure he'll be glad to hear about. I'm joking about in this video. Anyways, another night was gone. Halloween was approaching, and I had a funny idea for a video. The night of Halloween arrives, and I've got this strange feeling in my gut, or what's left of it, that my parents are going to cave tonight. I walked downstairs, much slower than usual, as typically I take 2 stairs on the way down and up, and just waited on the couch. My mom had left potato wedges in the oven, and there was meatloaf cooking. Under normal circumstances, I think the aroma from those would have made someone hungry, especially considering the situation, but me being the weirdo that I am, actually found myself rewatching most of good old Nikki D's channel during this time not eating. Most people would think that it's some sort of weird self-torture, but I like to think of it as hyperfixation with a hint of, coping. She eventually came back to check on the food, and I don't think she saw the corpse sitting on the couch the first time she walked in. But eventually there was some conversation. Ironically, once again, as the starving man, I was talking about the different cuts of steak and how they related to the body parts of a cow. It turns out if something looks edible, it probably can be eaten, like drywall. My dad walks into the kitchen and I'm invited to sit with him and offered food, but once again, I decline. The conversation drifts and they end up offering me back all of my property for me to eat again. Now that, my friends, is how you negotiate. Fuck both of them for taking almost a week and like 7 pounds of body weight for them to come to their senses. Good lord. But God was gracious enough to give them that much sense. I obliged, having my terms filled, and ate dinner after asking if it was dangerous to eat again immediately, because I know that if you go too long without having eaten, there's some spontaneous danger if you start eating again suddenly. Now my dad, being the asshole that he is, threw in the snarky comment that he didn't want to see me in the office of our house again, which is nice to know that he rejects me the same way fathers are supposed to set their sons on crosses. Rejection is a great subject. Mankind often has 2 problems, rebellion and rejection, which often one leads to the other, and then there's a pattern of sin. To the parents out there, fight your battles before your children end up wielding the sword you never could. So following that, I eventually regained my weight back up to the low hundreds. Dick's offered me employment, which I've happily accepted and worked my butt off doing. I even vacuumed the entire store, which took like 5 hours one day. That leaves one last question. Where does this story come to a close? Everything has a beginning and an end, and while this thing of sorts seems like it's never ending, here's what I'll leave you with. Pride is scary. I mean, really any sin is, but some people lack the determination to let go. My parents and I will likely be tied in this eternal fleshly battle. 2 pirates who duel on the sand for wealth, both having lost any dignity they might have once had. One with a knife hidden in a boot, and the other with a flintlock buried in their pocket. Exception being the strategy wielded by both, yet each their share of false righteousness, albeit black powder or blade. My dad used to tell me this story of how my family is related to Blackbeard, but his side of the family is also functionally non-existent, as nobody has ever met them, himself included, as he cast them out of his life in exchange for my mom. What a story that leaves us with as the circle comes full, having rejected his son too, as the son knows the same secrets that isolated him, having been wrought of the same blood and forged by the hammer of the one before him. Bleak poetry aside, regardless of what happens, my worth will never be an accounting of the number of subscribers, amount of money I've made, or the size of my team, but instead a function of those around me. I do not care how much persecution comes, albeit from Christians, non-Christians, random degenerates on the internet, or even my own head at times. I have you, I have Luke, the guy who edited the video, and I've got to say did a fantastic job. I've got my dignity, most days. I've got Joey, the guy who made use of his time while I was gone. I've got so many people who spent any amount of time with me. Sure, some of that wealth or people fade, and quite frankly, a lot of it does, but that's only to sift through it to find the people that really matter. It's a good thing, really, the pure gold. One day, everything will burn away, and you'll be left with a few things. Yourself, the memories of those you've met, and you'll be staring face to face with Elohim Adonai, the supernatural master of the universe. Now I ask you one last thing. How much gold is left? Look, if I learned one thing from all of this, it's sometimes we need to crank up the fire. Strike at the iron of your soul while it's hot, and you might come out of situations like this that much better. Granted, not everyone is able to do that, and your opponents may always seek to bring you down, but that sword that remains will be everlasting. It takes tons of patience to sit in your room and not eat anything for 5.5 days, much less deal with a bile in your throat every night, weakness, and a fever every now and then, and still somehow knowing that, well, it's for something. Granted, a stupid idea, but I've got God with me. What else could I possibly need? Well, yes, this story comes to a close knowing that they gave in, and returned that which they had stolen from me. Life moves on, so why make this video? Well, hopefully others might learn from this, and something else that I'm actually stealing from church is that confidence breeds confidence. Now don't be overzealous, like me, but all my life, my friends have been my greatest strength. Find some pure gold to keep yourself company. In fact, had I not had people that were so supportive, I doubt I would have had the strength to fight the good fight, if I didn't know what I was returning to was good. So thanks to everyone for their support and just overall kindness. Alright, so deep moral philosophy aside, I have no idea how to transition to this next segment, but just think of it like a summary of this month. You can tell I was obviously in a much different mood scripting this part than what follows, but for the sake of providing a reasonable suggestion for something to do, teaching you how to piss off your parents ever so slightly more, or just providing statistics throughout the month, that's what this next part is. No more Undertale references, I promise. At the very end of the month, what do I have to show for all this time? Well, I kept track of how many sit-ups I did each day. That's something. I also have a calendar full of sticky notes, which doesn't perfectly match up with each day of drawing, but close enough. And lastly, because I'm a petty moron, decided to keep track of how much my mom did each day in comparison to me, denoted by the red. Down was if she did less than me, and many of those days she often did literally nothing. Up was if she did more than me, and just to add a bit of spice to it, I recorded how long she took to change out of her pajamas some days, because I think that's a very clear indicator of laziness. Or maybe I'm just as delusional as my family says I am, but it seems like a paradox of sorts for us to both be delusional now, wouldn't it? As a quick side note, there's also the ridiculous amount of mobile games I played, and finishing the 3 books of the Pentateuch in the Bible. Quick vocabulary word for y'all. I beat 253 levels in Divinica, leveled up a few times in Heyday, currently level 97. In Battle Cats, I raised my user rank to 3,619 and beat every level except the last one and Beyond the Exosphere. I re-downloaded Clash Royale and saw that they tripled the number of microtransactions as well as the price. Alright, quick fire round. 3, 2, 1, go. I beat Little Alchemist, destroyed some 9-year-olds on Magic Tiles 3 competitive, made it to the Elite League in Magic Court Jump, got number 1 in a few tournaments in Tap Titans 2, made a few cities in Puzzlecraft 2, finished the introduction into my universe and then got bored, finished the first 100 levels in Wordscapes, did a few chess lessons, and like I mentioned earlier, made one of the top guilds in Top Heroes. Yeah, I'm a gamer through and through. More videos coming on some random games, hopefully sometime later this decade. Back to the calendar. There's a few more notes on there, like what I was able to do for Inktober. You'll also notice my Patreon members' headshots there, so if you'd like to be on my wall, the Patreon is still down in the description. I also walked about a mile each day with my dog, because I didn't just want to sit around the house. The number of sit-ups I did each day is indicated by the green number, and the blue number being push-ups, which admittedly I don't care about as much for some reason, despite probably, most definitely, almost certainly needing them more. Now, I like math and stuff, but I didn't quite care to tally up the amount of sit-ups, or other metrics, so I'll let my wonderful editors put that up on screen, along with any other notes they have. Would I recommend an experience like this month? Hell to the no. I've had my phone this entire time and could have spoken with my friends at any time, but I didn't, for a few reasons. mostly the assumption that my parents would have stolen my phone, and secondly, because I was also just a slight bit depressed. Here's a fun fact for you. If someone is sad, typically they smell worse than normal. Consider smelling your friends from time to time. Anyways, don't do stuff like this. Try to keep your parents in good spirits. But I also know that it's apparently very rare to have even half-decent parents, so make the most of each day. Love your friends. I mean it. There's nothing more you will find in life than your friends. If there's one word to live by, it's others. There's also Jesus, but I guess one word loved the other word so much that he died for it. To the people who've somehow made it to the very end, past all the religious, pish-posh, whatever, congratulations! Now I'm going to chill out and plug stuff. On a more serious note, it's probably super obvious at this point that I put more energy into these videos than the personality that I actually have. During other videos, my voice actually sounds like this, and this is kind of the voice I talk with normally. It's rip-off Moist Critical, but welcome to my life. Sometimes life is a bit more bleak and dreary than we want it to be, but why let it be? But why let it be? We can all make a difference, not just to the people around us, but to people online and much more than that. If I've learned one thing from the past few years, it's that the scrawny, mentally ill kid can make a network of 2,600 people, run a whole Discord community, do jazz, marching, and academic band, create the Dungeons & Dragons Club, and personally harass the leaders of a university for gross negligence. Plus, add a few art competitions, interviews, and talent shows in there, and you've got the online place that I'd really call a home. Now, if I can do this, any of you can do so much more, so I implore you to. Or just have those 1 or 2 friends and make each of their days special. That's something I rarely find, in fact. Not everybody can be a leader, but to be a good leader, you need to know when to be a good supporter or follower, and sometimes when to back away or leave too. It hurts, but that's the truth. With all of that out of the way, here's the dreaded Ask the Viewers for Money portion. Look, I do not want money, nor do I want it from people online who worked hard for it while I yelled into a mic and wrote a script over the past month. But if you do care to make a difference in my life or help my editors or artists, consider supporting the Patreon. Like I said towards the beginning of this video, I think it would be hilarious to have a full page, or multiple pages even, of people's names that paid $20 to tell my parents how stuff like this is. You can be one of the reasons I can leave a crappy life like this behind and get to make it on YouTube. Just consider it is all I'm saying. But ooh, you could buy this shiny Valorant Knight skin too with that money. I don't know where my money is going anyways. Is that a whole aquarium inside a gun? Again, another more serious note, I appreciate sympathy in the comments, but just remember, like this Discord server announcement months ago, real friends give more than lip service. You see, actions have a force that words cannot match. I think Isaac Newton said that, he invented the force or something. So hey, if you'd like to play Fortnite sometime with the smallest Fortnite YouTuber that's not yet once posted a Fortnite video and literally can't play Fortnite again because his PC isn't functional, consider joining the Discord! And lastly, a huge thanks to the editors and artists that make this stuff happen. Truly, I don't deserve people like them who spend hours and hours each day making the fantasies of some man-child like myself into a reality. Some of them even put time into the channel during October while I was away, and that takes some extreme integrity to do. To work without a leader shows more than leadership itself, but is probably one of the greatest blessings I've had with a team as great as this one. With all of that said, I'll see you, the viewer, fellow degenerate, parent even, or whoever you are, in a much better, more wholesome video sometime in the future. Have a good one, y'all.
Hey, editor here. So, you see, black screen, right? Well, if you go over here and do a little bit of this, it's like, whoa, look, a QR code. That's kind of awesome. I mean, I don't know. I thought it might be cool to showcase. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.